Howdy folks, we're going to be talking a little bit about modes in blues today. Now modes are something that creates an awful lot of discussion amongst guitarists. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. It seems that modes are this kind of like, when you've been playing guitar a bit, it's like you want to find out about modes. They're like this weird thing, you know, I want to find out about modes, I want to find out about modes. Then you find out about modes and you think, oh, actually they're not, I'm not going to use them that much at all. You know, they're not massively useful for the majority of players. You know, if you're playing a lot of jazz stuff or fusion stuff, that sort of stuff, yeah, you'll use modes a lot. But in other forms of playing, you don't use modes an awful lot. So what I'm saying is, don't get too hung up on modes. You know, they're not the pot of gold that you quite think they are. But in blues, some of the modes are really useful, right? In particular, one mode. So the modes are Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian. Okay, that's it. I always remember it by I don't punch like Muhammad Ali. That's the one I learned to remember it anyway. But we're not going to learn all about the different modes. We're going to learn about how modes are useful in the blues. So Ionian is the major scale, right? Now you can play the major scale across the blues if you want, but it's not going to be massively useful because we're playing over, and we're talking about major blues here. If we're playing over a major blues, we've got if we've got, say, do it in A, right? A7 chord has a flat 7 in. The major blues has a major 7, so there's a clash there. So it's not going to be that useful, right? Then you've got Dorian. Dorian's a minor mode. We're playing across major here, so I wouldn't say Dorian is that useful. You can use Dorian across the blues, but it's not the really useful one. Phrygian is that one that sounds Spanishy sounding. Okay, so that's not massively useful in the blues. However, having said that, Eric Gales uses Phrygian dominant a bit in blues, but that's another story. Okay, so after that you've got Lydian. Lydian's not going to be that useful. Then you've got Mixolydian. Bang! Mixolydian is your one. That's the really important one in the blues, and we're going to explain why. After Mixolydian, we've got Aeolian. That's sometimes called the natural minor scale. Again, not massively useful in the blues. Then you've got Locrian. That's not going to be very useful in the blues either. So basically, Mixolydian is the one you want to look at. You can kind of, I'm not saying forget the rest of them in the blues, but Mixolydian is the king, really, of the modes as far as blues is concerned. So let's look at why. Let's look at why Mixolydian is so useful to us, okay? Now, Mixolydian is so useful to us because it's the scale that's built around a dominant 7th chord. That's basically it, all right? When you think of modes, a big issue with modes is people relate modes to major scales. So, for example, they say, right, C major is the same as D Dorian, it's the same as E Phrygian, etc. That's kind of okay, and it's kind of not okay. It's okay to help you understand the different positions and how you can play them, but really what you want to think of a mode as being is something in its own individual right, a scale in its own individual right. So let's look at the Mixolydian mode and break it down as a scale in its own right. So if we take this A7 chord, okay, so a dominant 7th chord, as you may know, has a 1, has a major 3rd, has a 5, and it has a flat 7. So those are the notes in the dominant 7th chord. So in here, that's my 1, that's my 5, that's my flat 7, that's my 3, the 5's repeated, and the 1's there. So it's a mixture of 1s, 3s, 5s, and flat 7s, okay? So think of the Mixolydian mode as the 1, 3, 5, flat 7, but with added notes on that fit harmonically with the 1, 3, 5, flat 7. So let's explore what those are. So if we've got the 1 there, and let's put the 3 there, that's the major 3rd, right? We've got a 2 right in the middle. So the Mixolydian mode has 1, 2, 3. Because those notes are separated by a tone, so they fit quite well together. Okay, the Mixolydian mode then has the 4. That could be a bit of an issue, we'll talk about that in a minute. the 5, which is in the chord, the 6, okay, that's a tone away from the 5, look, and the flat 7th. Right, so we've got this. So Mixolydian is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, okay? Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. So let's compare that with an Ionian mode, or the major scale. It's the same thing. That's just got a major 7th. So a Mixolydian mode is exactly the same as a major scale, but with a flattened 7th. So a major scale would sound like this. You recognise that. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Julie Andrews, Sound of Music, blah, blah, blah. But a Mixolydian mode is this. Because it's in the chord. Right? Now this is the real important take home, that you understand that Mixolydian fits dominant 7th chords. Alright? Each mode has a chord that fits it, a chord that sounds like the mode. Right? And dominant 7th is Mixolydian, and this is why it fits so well across a major blues progression. So if we're doing a major blues in A7, D7, E7, right, those would be the chords in A7, wouldn't they? Right, across the A7 we'd play A Mixolydian. Now when we go to the D7 chord, right, we can't play A Mixolydian anymore because it's a D7 chord. We want to play D Mixolydian. So this is the same in other lessons I've taught, right? Where in a major blues, when you're playing major over major blues, you need to follow the chords. So now we're thinking of D Mixolydian, right? And then back to the A. We're back to A Mixolydian. Okay, obviously over the E. E Mixolydian. D Mixolydian. All right, so it's important to get familiar with those. So let's just talk a little bit about what I'm doing. Let's just play the scale in 1 octave to start off with. All right, so Mixolydian mode for A Mixolydian would be, so I'm just going 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, 5, and then I'm back to the octave again. So you can see it's quite nice and symmetrical up to that point. Alright, then over the D, same thing again, but off the A string. There's the octave. And off the E, just think of it as being like the D, but 2 frets up. Okay, and then back to the A again. Now across the A, let's think about the scale across all the strings, right? It would be like this. Right, that's what we did so far. So, but we're going to 9 on the D as well. Then we go in here, we're going 6, 7, 9, and I've got this written down here if you have a look. So we've got 6, 7, 9, then we go in 7, 8, 10, then we go in 7, 9, 10. Okay, so that is the Mixolydian mode in A7. So it's really important to learn that as a scale, to be able to play that whole Mixolydian mode position, which is coming off the chord itself. We're going to talk about how to apply it in a minute. So now off the D we get this. So it's the same on the first 3 strings. Okay, then on the B string we've got to go here 7, 8, 10, and the same with the E string. So that's D Mixolydian. And if we think of it in terms of intervals, we've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, back to 1 again. All right, then across the E, same deal as the D, but 2 frets up. Right, so that's what it is, right? That's how you play it across those chords. And obviously if you want to do it in G, for example, you just shift everything down 2 frets like you do with everything on guitar. That's nice and easy to change keys with it. So how do we play it? Because we don't want to be playing a nice A7 blues going like this, do we? We don't want to be playing scales. All right, we could play elements of scales, but we want to create little melodies and interesting ideas. So the best way to see it, I think, is seeing it coming out of the chord. Because if you're looking at the chord here, right, I'm seeing that chord, and I'm seeing, and we'll just stick with the A7, but you need to apply this to the D7 and the E7. Right, when I see that chord, and I see the other notes of the Mixolydian scale kind of like superimposed on top of it. So in my head, I see those notes, but I see these notes here, look, right? I'm kind of pointing them out, yeah, superimposed on top of the scale. But the important notes are the ones here in the chord, because they're the chord tones. So I might start like this, because those notes, I'm seeing those within the chord. I'm also thinking, I know that's the root, that's the third, there's the flat 7. So I'm seeing those in the scale. Now those notes, I haven't got that note down in the chord, but I still know it's the root, and I still know it's the flat 7 there. Now I could fill it in with extra notes from the Mixolydian mode. Like I could add that note in, like a go. So what I did there was I thought of this chord, I thought of the notes within the chord, or chord tones as well, and then I filled in some extra notes from the Mixolydian scale, ending on a root note. Okay, I'm seeing that. And then I'm putting notes in from the chord tones towards the end of it rather than at the start of it. But I'm seeing the mode here, the notes in the mode, and then I'm kind of seeing this major third here, and then the root, then the 5. Okay, and then I'm thinking root, third, 5. But I'm also seeing the scale there. Yeah, so I'm kind of mixing the chord tones and the scale together. If I just play the scale, it's not going to sound so good because I'm not going to be hitting those chord tones often enough. As far as chord tones go, you've got the 1, the 3, the 5 and the flat 7. Well, that's 4 out of 7 notes, isn't it? So if you play it kind of randomly, if you like, playing the notes randomly, 4/7 of those notes that you play are going to be chord tones. 3/7 aren't. So there's a chance, sort of a bit less than 50-50, that when you land on a note, it's not going to be a chord tone. Well, those odds aren't very good to me. I want to be landing on chord tones, you know. I really want to be making my lines sound good, and I want to make them sound good by landing on chord tones rather than pot lucking it and 3/7 of the time landing on a note that isn't a chord tone. And the notes that aren't chord tones, by the way, are called tension tones, right? And that is a good word for them because you create a bit of tension and you want to resolve down to that chord tone. All right, so this is how you need to play around with it. Across the D and the E, basically you need to apply the same sort of thinking with that. Now, back towards the start of the video, I said the 4 might be a little bit of an issue. So let's explain why the 4 might be a bit of an issue. So by the 4, I mean the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4th note in the Mixolydian scale. The problem is with this chord, the chord's got a major third in it, okay? Right, now the 4, the 1, 2, 3, 4, is a semitone. It's the same note. D, it's a semitone above that note. Why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because if I'm playing the chord and it's got that note in, the major third, which is a D flat, and over the top of that I'm playing a D. There's a D flat there, and there's a D. I get this sound. It's pretty horrid, right? Right? So when I'm playing my Mixolydian mode, and I hit that note, and I've got this note playing in the chord, right? I'm gonna get this horrible sound. So does that mean you can't play the 4? No, not really. Even though it's actually called an avoid note, right? That's its technical name, it's an avoid note. But I think that's a bit of a misplaced word, really. It's not. It doesn't mean avoid it. It means don't hang about on it, basically, right? If I end a phrase on this note over this chord, again, we're going to get this sound, which it's not very harmonious, is it? So we can play that note, but we want to move away from it quite quickly. See, all that's all right, like going. You know, the 4 is a really nice note, but the way I'm playing it there, I'm going to it and coming away from it again and coming back to a root note or a chord tone. That would be all right. But I don't want to do a phrase that lands on it, okay? Because it's going to clash. It's going to clash with that note. You can't hear it at the moment because there isn't a chord underneath it. But imagine that note being underneath it and that note being played over the top of it. You can appreciate there's going to be a clash there because of that semitone. So that should really help you in understanding why the Mixolydian mode is so closely tied into blues playing, and hopefully now you'll be able to use it with a bit more confidence and add that to your blues repertoire. Because let's think about it now. You can think about your chord tones, right? So thinking about it in a major way. You can obviously use the minor pentatonic across the whole lot, but you can also use Mixolydian, right? But remember, the Mixolydian has to follow the chords. Now, if you want to find out about using Mixolydian across the D and the E, you'll have to check out my Patreon page, which is below, because I'm going to do some. So I'm going to do a video based on soloing using the D Mixolydian and E Mixolydian and how those shapes relate back to the chords, and also a few more other things. It's also worth checking out because there's a lot of great content on there, particularly something I call the cross system, which is my system on how to solo really simply using chord tones in the blues. Okay, catch you next time. And please remember to subscribe.